Ladies and gentlemen, ears of corn all over the internet and indeed the world. Welcome to the Corn Chronicles. The search continues. I am, of course, Tom Policastro, and tonight I am honored to be joined by Miss Bitsy Sanders. Bitsy, how are we doing tonight?
Oh, we're doing just fine. I'm so happy to be here.
Ah, man, excellent. I'm so happy to have you. Bitsy and I are both fellow professional writing majors from the great York College of Pennsylvania. Certainly a lot of good memories just kind of being holed up in rooms with no windows, typing away on keyboards.
Yep, that's pretty much the long and short of it right there. I forgot about that basement.
Yeah, man. Every class, I do forget the number. I think it was like writing 10, and it's just like this big squirreled away room where you can't see anything, but it was still just like, yes, go to the main writing room.
I
So,
don't I don't understand how they thought that would foster creativity, but somehow it worked. It really
it
did.
did. Not a lot of great tans for the writers.
No, we're all just like very, very pasty.
Oh man. So again, I'm very excited to speak to Bitsy tonight. Uh, Bitsy, we certainly have a few things to cover because I'm really so very interested in some of the things you've achieved and worked on here in your life, at least that I'm aware of, and I'm sure that there are so many more that I'm not. But why don't we start with something easy, or at least more basic? Why don't you tell me what drew you to your college specifically, which is of course where we met.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I actually didn't start off my educational career at York College. I actually started off at Goucher College in Baltimore, Maryland, specifically because they had a not teach, I'm sorry, they had a study abroad program, but they actually paid for their students to study abroad. And I thought that's really cool.
Yeah.
Um, but they offered me this great scholarship package my freshman year, and then all of a sudden my sophomore year, they were like, "Oh, nope, we can't offer you that anymore." And I mean, we're talking like that was like a $50,000 a year school, and I'm sure it's more than that now. But of course, you can't hack that. And York is right down the road from my hometown,
Mhm.
so I decided, you know what, like spending this much money on on a college degree is just insane. I'm not going to be able to enjoy myself after I graduate. So I was like, you know what? I heard York College has a really great education program because I originally wanted to go to be a teacher. So I applied and I didn't declare a major, but I believe it was when I got there my sophomore year. I was living off campus actually with a group of friends from high school, and we had a house on Jackson Street. You know the infamous Jackson
Yeah,
Street.
indeed. Yeah. A lot of memories of lack thereof. Yeah.
Oh, exactly. But of course, I didn't do anything like that. I was an angel. But we had this house, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do when I got there because it just sort of York, even though it was like a local, quote unquote, local school, to where I grew up. And I think like going to school locally kind of has the stigma where people are like, oh, well, they didn't try very hard to get out of town, so they must not be very motivated. But that was the exact opposite of what I was. But anyway,
Exactly. You
I
want to
did,
life after school. Yeah.
yeah. So I ended up working at the bookstore because I lived so close to campus. I could work there over breaks, and I decided um, I decided to take the advice of a couple of my bookstore employees and switch my major to professional writing. They're like, you love writing, but you don't really like all of the red tape and all of the politics of teaching. So why don't you just switch to professional writing since it's pretty much the brunt of what you love about teaching English? And I said, you know what? That's not a bad idea. So that's what I did. And in professional writing, I feel like it's so specific to your college. Like
Isn't it? Yeah.
it's one of its smaller majors, but it's also one of its like biggest strengths because it's not a major that's offered at a lot of colleges. And I absolutely loved like Dr. Della Carpini and Dr. Zerby and Dr. Kowalski. I loved all of them, and Dr. Yonker, and they just made me feel at home in that major. And so you know, I that's how I ended up at your college. It was actually a total accident. But I don't know. It was definitely the right decision, and I'm so happy that I'm where I am today.
Awesome. And to your point, that writing major was so very unique because it's basically the reason I went to York. I didn't want to go to school in state from New York. I just kind of wanted the space and things like that. Like that was just an appeal to me. And for a while, for me, I was considering maybe a theater major or something like that. But at the end of the day, I just didn't really want to pursue that. What I wanted to do, what drew me to York specifically, was the professional writing program because it seemed to me that they didn't try to funnel you into a career in journalism, and nor did they try to convince you that you were like the next Theodore Dreiser. You know what I'm saying? And it just seemed like a very practical curriculum for a very impractical career choice. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was, to your point, it was incredibly unique. And what's cool about with the way that major was structured is, to my mind, there were so many different types of personalities just in the major itself, both amongst our instructors and of course amongst each other. So that was really
For sure. Well, and like rewinding a little bit what you were saying, like practical curriculum for impractical major, I specifically remember multiple of those professors saying, if you need us to speak to your parents about all of the jobs that you can have after you graduate with a pro writing degree, we will gladly do that. Because I think it's almost like, majoring in fine arts. It's like, what are you going to do with that? Or majoring in philosophy. People are just like, well, if you're not going to law school, it's not worth it. And I'm over here and I'm just like, I don't know, I had a career in publishing after I graduated. I was lucky enough to have a career in the publishing field for a little while. And I just found out that I didn't like it. I didn't like that particular aspect of it. So it got me somewhere, it helped me realize what I didn't want to do. But yeah, I miss it. I really miss it. I absolutely loved those 3 years. Oh my gosh.
yeah,
For sure.
I miss it. I mean, it definitely took you out of your comfort zone, kind of. I don't know. It just kind of sharpened strengths you had. It certainly, brought up abilities you didn't. I learned more things from that professional editing course than I have any right admitting. I think there were many.
Oh, yeah, that was brutal. That was brutal. I'll never forget. And I think that was Zerby, right? I think Zerby was really. I think he felt really bad because sometimes he would hand my paper back to me. He would be like, I'm like, yeah, we can talk about this later. We don't need to talk about this now because there would be so many red marks on it. I'm just like, how? There can't even be this many things wrong that exist in the world. I don't understand. He had such a he had such tact though and such truth when he push about it. He was cool.
Yeah, one of the many Zerbianisms is, well, your paper was not without merit. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, he was the only man that could make the statement "you suck" sound like a compliment.
Exactly. He was very magic in that sense. I told him once, and I told him once, I was like, I'm really more of an orator than a writer. Which he got, which I love. Yeah. I miss him. I do. I miss a lot of them. Boy, oh boy. Dr. Propin too. I think about her pretty often. She was a real sweetheart.
Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, you know what? I hope she never listens to this. I honestly, I remembered her face, but I could not remember her name for the longest time. And you just wow. That opened the floodgates. Totally.
Yeah. Oh, she was lovely. And I always felt, I really don't. I don't consider myself a natural prankster, for lack of a word, or anything like that. But there were so many times where she would approach something so earnestly, and I tend to be like more quick-witted for my own good. You know what I'm saying? And I remember so vividly one time that she made like a Sex and the City reference, which I've never seen.
Hold on.
Uh,
Froze.
but oh dear. Okay. So she made like a Sex
You're
and the
good.
City.
Good.
Am I back? You okay?
You're back. Sorry, you're
Beautiful.
back.
Okay. She made like a Sex and the City reference, which I'd never seen. And I just like leaned over to Denny because Denny's my guy, man, a million percent. And I said to Denny, I was just like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
you know. And Dr. Proper goes, Denny, do you really? And she starts like going to talk to him about it. I'm like, oh no, I'm sorry. Like I didn't mean to get. She got so excited. I felt awful. Man, but she was a sweetheart. All good. Yeah, beautiful. Bitsy, uh, shoot, I'm not gonna hit you with the general statement of just like, so what makes you a writer or what influences you as a writer? Because I feel like that's a huge question, and two, that can be so tangential. And like, if somebody hit me with that question, I'd be like, well, geez, bro, like why do we need oxygen and things like that? To me, that's kind of equivalent. But what I will kind of prod you on a little bit, can you give me an example of maybe 2 or 3 authors that you've read where you had kind of this realization that said like, hey, I can do this too? You know what I'm saying? Any of those kind of influences?
Mm-hmm.
I find that, when you kind of see what you're reading and it's almost like your peers that you haven't met yet. You know what I'm saying? That's how I feel about it anyway.
I mean, I feel like that's something that's continuously happening. Every time I read something, I'm like, oh, hey, I like that style. I could do that,
Yeah.
I feel like when people say, if anybody even alludes to the fact that I have an original style, I'm like, no. Like, I just feel like this mosaic of every single author I've ever read. But anywho, I could trace that to answer your question. Like, I could trace those authors back to elementary school. Like, I specifically remember, actually, it's really funny. Shel Silverstein hits my keyboard sitting on one of his books right now. That's really funny.
Wow.
But Shel Silverstein is one of my all-time favorite poets slash authors slash lyricist, whatever you want to peg him as. But I remember being read his poetry by my second grade teacher, Mrs. Appler, and I remember thinking that like how much I loved rhyming and just like the rhythm of it, and I loved the fact that he could be funny with it, but also like super sincere, and he could make these really profound points, but just it's in a children's book. It's just like these life lessons that are woven into these words that rhyme, and I'm just like, that's a magical superpower, and I want to do that too. So, she really pushed us to like enter all of these little poetry and writing contests that the local newspaper had. So, I think like it was definitely second grade that like I really sort of tapped into that vein of, oh hey, I could do this too. And it was rhyming that started it all. And it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, I have this need, this undying, insatiable need to just describe everything that I see with words. Like, you know how like some people can stand in front of a sunset and they can just enjoy looking at it. That's fine. I can enjoy looking at it too, but in my mind I'm trying to think of like what words can I use to describe it. Like, even if it's just a Facebook status, like how am I going to convey this to the world that's not a photo, So definitely it definitely stems back to that, I think. And poetry was definitely like my gateway drug, I guess, but it wasn't even like that deep, like super super intense, super emotional poetry. It was Shel Silverstein and Jack Prelutsky and like even Dr. Seuss. It was just being attracted to how people could make words rhyme and mean something so important. That's what did it for me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it sure does. absolutely. I mean, I definitely can agree with that. I mean, it's all about, at the end of the day, they're just kind of, words are just kind of the things you play with. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you make profound stuff, sometimes you make silly stuff. Anyway, but bottom line, I'm really on that. Absolutely. Um, so, are there any? Okay, I'm gonna give two examples from my life because I feel like this question is gonna come out different, kind of orally. Are there any moments where you kind of felt the opposite, like what the hell am I doing as a writer? My two examples are me trying to read Ulysses and me considering, like I'm not the brightest bulb, but like when it comes to words and things like that, like I've always been attuned to that, and I'm not going to make this interview about me, but like that wordplay and things like that, to your point, that's always been the stuff that has come to me just like that.
Right.
I remember trying to read Ulysses during like my second year of college, and my head is all ballooned up. It's just like, no, I'm a writing major. And it's just like, hey, I'm doing pretty well. And I'm trying to read this book, and I'm just like, I have no idea what I'm reading. And I swear to you, I got 10 pages in. And I also swear to you that I kind of got the gist of what was going on, but like literally after that 10 pages, I was just like, this is not fun. Like this is awful. And then I also went to a lecture series when we were in college, and the lecture was on fractals. And if you asked me then what a fractal was, if you ask me now what a fractal is, I'd be like, okay, they're patterns that repeat. And literally that's all I know. I went to this like hour and 20-minute like a panel on like fractals, and they have this guest speaker, and you have some of like Dr. Taylor's up there. I think Dr. Zerby was up there. Like it was like this big set. It was a big deal for the writing program. I swear to God, the only words I understood were like "Good evening, everyone," and then like literally just like everything else was like way over my head, to the point where I'm just looking around the room like, are we all pretending that we know what's going on? So that's I wanted to kind of set the tone for what I meant by that, and I'm always kind of anytime I have the chance to kind of speak with an artist and certainly a writer, I try to kind of get their perspective on that. Is there anything that kind of jumps out at you?
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, first of all, I mean, this might be slightly off topic, but I felt that way several times in college, where it's just kind of like, okay, this is a place where everybody comes together and pretends like they know what they're talking about. There were so many times where, I kid you not, like, because I worked like 4 part-time jobs. When I was a senior, I worked 4 part-time jobs.
Wow.
And I was commuting to school. So like I was super busy, but there were days where I literally put a presentation together sitting in my car in the commuter parking lot, like just like, okay, this is what I'm going to say. And I would literally just jot down a list of bullet points. And then I would go up there and present in front of my peers. So it's just kind of like, you got to wonder like how many people actually do that, because it's just interesting. I think when you go to college and you get a degree, it's definitely like 85% what you put into it, and the other 15% is like what they put in front of you, because it's, especially like now when I'm in grad school, like all my classes are online, and it's definitely that, because you're not getting that same experience. Anyway, I digress. Like, absolutely, to answer your question, I've definitely had those moments, and there are times when I read a book, which it's been a long time since I've actually sat down to like leisure read. It hasn't been on a screen, but there are times where I've read things and I've seen that it's gotten like 2 million hits, or I've seen that it's sold like 5 million copies, and I'm reading this, and I think this is one way that the professional writing major has ruined me. But I'll read this content and I'm just like, how? how did this person get famous? Who edited this?
Yeah.
This is a mess. I don't understand. There's like no meaning and no substance to this. So it's kind of given me this I don't want to really call it a complex, but like I can't read something without picking it apart anymore. That's what my education's done to me, and it's a blessing and a curse in and of itself. Because I feel thankful that I can recognize what good writing is, because I've been exposed to so much of it, and I've conversed and edited with like minds such as yourselves, in the classroom and even outside of the classroom. So like I've definitely sat down and thought about that. But to be honest with you, like my writing habits, I used to write all the time. I used to write all the time. And I honestly can't tell you the last time I sat down and wrote creatively, like for myself. And it used to be such a therapeutic thing for me. And now it's just kind of like, I feel like social media has kind of crept in and take over. It's taken over that space. Now, don't get me wrong. I have so many projects happening that like fulfill me in so many ways, but I kind of feel like I'm cheating on writing with like, photo documenting, or like just the things that I do for grad school. I have to keep up with their social media accounts. So I feel like social media has just sort of taken the place of like it's soaked up all the creative juices I have for like putting
Right.
string words together.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's true. To your point, obviously when we were younger and had a little more time, but if we ever really have time, it was easy to kind of sit down and write, and Lord knows there were always kind of ideas popping and things like that. But now, social media, other projects, I mean, I've taken some strides musically. It's just kind of, for me, if you spend all day looking at a computer screen, it's hard to like be done with that and then say like, okay, now I'm gonna do it, but this time it's on my turn. Do you know what I'm saying? Like that's a hard hump to get over, in my opinion. What I have started doing recently, and this is relative to nothing, which has been cool, is I've been writing a lot of letters, and I wouldn't necessarily call that creative writing per se. It's not, but at the same time, like it's been cool to kind of, kind of, it is creative in its own way, and just kind of, yeah, I don't know. That has scratched a lot of itches that I didn't know I kind of had.
Well, there's something like romantic about that, and not in like a loving kind of sense. It's just romantic in a way that it's just, it's something intimate, like to actually sit down and write the words that you're thinking of. You actually have to slow down and consider what you're doing. It's not like you can hit the delete button, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's not something so instantaneous. It sort of like puts that need for instant gratification on the back burner. So I don't know, like if somebody sat down and wrote me a letter, I would be absolutely ecstatic. Not only because receiving something in the mail that's not a bill is absolutely fantastic.
That's rare, yeah.
Yeah, everybody can agree on that point. But like the fact that somebody actually sat down and took even just 15 minutes to think of you and to think about what to say to you, like that's time. Time's like the best gift you can give somebody. So I think it's super creative, because I don't know, you're like exercising your brain just to slow down and I don't know, just switch lanes, I guess.
Yeah, it has been cool. It's been a nice little, I don't want to call it cathartic, but it has been a nice kind of, because how often do you stop and think about people? You know what I'm saying? Like it's more that too, and it's just kind of like, it's not even necessarily the words you write. It's more just like, oh, I feel this way about this person, and it's not something that you've really considered until you stop to really think about, which has been part of what's cool about this project, quite frankly. But now I digress. That's my bad.
It's okay. It's okay. You want to hear something really interesting?
Yeah.
I love writing letters. It was something that like I actually made an effort to do. Like I did a postcard project where I would write haikus. Like if somebody just sent me their address, I would write them a haiku on a postcard and I would send it to them. So it forced me to like practice writing poetry, but also like somebody would get a piece of snail mail, for themselves. So it was like a win-win. And people would take pictures of the postcards and send it to me, and then I would repost them. It was a really cool little project that I did for a while. I don't know why I stopped it, but then I was like, I want to take this a step further. And I thought, who would really appreciate this? And I was like, you know what? People in prison would really appreciate this. So I ended up becoming pen pals with like a handful of prisoners up and down the East Coast. And let me tell you, I got a P.O. box. And I'm not passing judgment, but like you never know who you're talking to when you haven't met them in person, right? So like I got a P.O. box and all of the correspondence went through that. But they get they get very territorial over their pen pals. Like I and they all wanted to meet. Like after they got out of prison, they all wanted to meet. Like it was supposed to be strictly platonic. I never ever sent any signals. Like I made sure of it, and somehow I had like 5 gentlemen in 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 the pen that were just barking up my tree, and I was just like, oh my god, this was the best and worst mistake ever. It was just terrible. But anyway, I didn't know if you knew that little interesting nugget about my writing endeavors, but I wanted to share that.
Wow. No. Well, thank you so much. That's incredible. Wow. My goodness.
So maybe don't do that if you want to write letters. Maybe don't write them to someone in prison unless you know them personally some way somehow.
Right. Or at least just skip the haiku. Like
Who knew? Who knew? Haiku was so. Who knew that was a thing? Anyway,
productive art of the haiku. Yeah.
you should write a
5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables, all up. All right. No. I'm
what?
Man. So, Bitsy, can you tell me? Here's where I kind of jump into waters that I'm sure are far too deep for me, but I'm just incredibly curious. Back when you were writing more consistently, you put out a series of chapbooks. By my notes, Color in the Cheeks, Rule of Three, and Reasons Why I Could Never Be a Stripper. Can you?
Yeah.
Can you talk me through what kind of the shoot? I mean, the fact is, you're on another level, but we're both writers, so it's not like I need to know like how did you write that. But like, can you tell me a little bit about what went into those pieces? Were there kind of recurring themes and kind of what each of those kind of means to you separately? Is that like a lot to ask?
No, that's not. Actually, like it's a really the way you phrased that kind of set it up perfectly because it was all 3 of those books. So first it was Color in the Cheeks, right? That was my first one. And people look at that title and they automatically think it's something sexual, and I'm like, no. Like
only the prisoners, yeah. No.
I mean, there definitely are some sexual themes in some of those poems for sure. But I think when I graduated from college, I felt that I was working a job. I was working an office job, and I felt like so constricted and so I don't know. It almost felt like so rigid, and I hated that. And I just wanted to sort of like exercise the creative part of my mind to like an extreme. And I think breaching that barrier, like I had never written anything like that before in my life. And I started to like tap into, the risque, sort of like sexual femininity. And it was really fascinating. And people were really like open to reading whatever I wrote after I sort of tapped into that vein. I mean, sex sells. That's just the bottom line. But I wasn't doing it to make money. I was doing it because like it it made me feel colorful, you know? Like I was going and working this 9 to 5 job where I just sat in a cubicle all day, staring at a screen and like doing what other people told me. And that was something that was just completely unleashed. And I really, really like that. So that first book, and when I read it, I cringe. I honestly do, because like I see myself growing up in those books. I
Yeah.
really, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my God. And being that, you know, like I'm an educator, and you know, going for my master's in education, I'm like, oh, if anybody ever connects the dots on those books, I mean, it is
Yeah.
what it is. It's out there, and like it's not going away. I can't disassociate myself from it.
Attracted. Yeah.
But you know, it's not risque to the point where it's kind of like, if my grandma ever reads this, I'll never be able to come out of hiding. It's not quite that bad.
Right. Of course.
It's subtle. It's more for like people who can read between the lines. If you read between the lines, you'll be like, oh ho ho, I know what she's trying to do. But other than that, it's not like, you know, it's not like 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
It's
Well, that's heavy-handed. Yeah.
right, exactly. It's just sort of my own thing. But anyway, Color in the Cheeks was sort of like where I dipped my toes into that. And then there was Reasons Why I Could Never Be a Stripper. That was my second one. And again, because there's stripper in the title, everybody automatically just like takes it down that road. But it was Reasons Why I Could Never Be a Stripper.
Exactly.
And it means like no disrespect to any woman or man in the profession. I mean, kudos to them. You have to have severe confidence and like
Yeah.
just intense skills to get up there and do what they do. But anyway, that again, it was just sort of like me exercising. I don't want to call it a demon. Just it was just me like being the person that I wasn't 9 to 5, and again, people were entertained by it, so I kept doing it. I like to make people smile, and that writing did. People would be like, "Wow, this is pretty." People liked it, and started posting. Like how I would gauge it is I would write something that I wanted to go in the book, or write something that I wanted to go in a book, and I would post it on Hello Poetry. I don't know if you.
Yeah.
So I got kind of like a nice little cult following on that site, which was nice. And they're all very, very supportive. And some of them are, you know, some people have writing degrees, some people don't, some people have English degrees. But a lot of them are just like amateur poets that are just out there because they want to share what they've written. But I would get a lot of really, really good feedback. And I actually made a lot of really good friends through that site. And so the finished product of whatever I published was usually a result of, you know, their feedback. I never actually took my poems to somebody I knew and said, hey, read these and give me some edits. Like I never actually did that because I wasn't doing it to make money, you know.
Yeah.
I was just doing it for me. I told myself, I'm like, I'm going to publish a book by the time I'm 23. And I did. And then I just tried to do one like every year or so after that. But the last book I published, Rule of Three, was, I called it that because it was the third book in my series of chapbooks. And that one, like, I started to go more essay, more like creative nonfiction.
Yeah.
So that one's sort of like half creative nonfiction, half poetry. And it's crazy. Like I didn't even know you were going to ask me about my books. That's just so funny because I haven't even thought about them in so long. It's been a while. Because I suffered a lot of like loss when I was putting that one together. And you can see that. Like it's really hard for me to go back and reread those books because I just relive everything. Like I don't write something unless my heart's in it. You can't. Like I wouldn't publish something that I'm like, oh, this is a piece of crap. I might as well put there. If I'm in it, I don't put it out there. So when I reread these things, it's like I refeel everything that I was experiencing in that moment. And that was probably some of the hardest stuff that I ever went through. And I mean, and people really appreciate it, but it's also just, writing is just always a very personal thing. It doesn't matter what it doesn't matter what you're writing, whether it be like nonfiction, poetry, like creative nonfiction, it doesn't matter. Like it's those words that you chose to string together. It's your thought.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's your feeling, and you put it out there. People are gonna have their opinions, and I think that's probably why I never like actually tried to like get an agent and like try to get something published the traditional way through a publishing house, because I really like I value the stuff that I put out there so much. I don't want somebody chopping it up and putting it in the order that they think it should be. And like I'm open to that, but in the end, like no, this is
It's your fault.
my own personal stuff, you know? It's a reflection of me. I don't want you like breaking the mirror and rearranging it so that my face looks like what you think it should look like. No, this is me, you know? So, but that was sort of the progression of my books. But if you, it's really funny because if I'm not suggesting that you do this, but if you sit down and you read it from like number 1 through number 3, you can really see the growth both as a writer, but then also as a person, like maturing. Especially like relationship and content wise. I just learned an awful lot. And if anything, like that's better than any social media account, any like progression of Instagram photos or Facebook statuses. Like those books, that poetry and those essays, whew, when my kids read those, I'm gonna have a lot of, I'll put it that way.
Well, that'll be that will be a special time, I'm sure. Man, very interesting.
It will be special. That's a good word. Yeah, indeed.
So, I kind of, all right. So there are two things I want to talk about, but you can absolutely pick the order and what you're interested in sharing, this, that, or the other thing. I kind of want to talk about, especially because it came up earlier in our talk, you did find your way back to teaching, and I kind of want to hear about that path. And again, I know that these are huge questions that are tough to like summarize, so I really appreciate your patience. And also, you spent some time as the poet laureate of Hanover, and I'm just insanely curious of like how that came to be. What are those kind of requirements, and what did you kind of glean from that? Like that, to me, that sounds fascinating. I've met 2 poet laureates in my life. One of them, York, and we actually spoke for a good long time because we shared some poetry. And I never quite had the guts to say like, so how do you do what you do? I didn't want to confess that I didn't really know. Like, I knew what a poet laureate was, but not like how you came to be one. So I'm very curious to know that. Those are 2 things that you can kind of blend and do whatever the hell you want. But those are some definitely things that I want to hear about.
Yeah. Well, that was also kind of an accident. I'm not even gonna lie. So there's a group of these super saged writers in my hometown. It's like the secret society of poets, and I kid you not. Like I always kind of knew that they existed. There were like whispers of their existence, but I never really knew like where they met or what they did. I just knew that there were like these really there was this group of people that people always spoke of in reverent tones, and I knew a few of them were teachers.
Right.
My family, I come from a family of teachers, so I'd be like, "Oh, do you know so and so that taught here?" And they were like, "Yeah, we're good friends with them." And I was like, "I want to talk to them." And I knew that one of those teachers had been a previous poet laureate, so I got in touch with her, and I just started talking because at that point in my life, like I really wanted to keep writing, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it, and I wasn't quite sure how to get involved with all the things that were happening in my hometown, because there weren't really a whole lot of writing-centric events that were happening in my hometown. Like York, where we went to school, there were, and Harrisburg and like the metropolises, but nothing happening in my hometown. So anyway, I kind of wanted to kickstart some stuff like that. And I was talking to her, and she and I actually became very, very good friends. And we started like going out for coffee every now and then, and just chatting about writing and sharing some of our writing with one another. And she was like, hey, listen, like, I really like your stuff. And just wanted to let you know that like the acting poet laureate is stepping down here soon. And we'd really like to get somebody younger in the spot because I really think that you could sort of like kick up the dust. And was that something you would be interested in? And I'm over here like just dumbfounded. Like,
Yeah,
what?
I couldn't imagine. Boy, oh boy.
But first of all, I mean, my town's not very big. It's not like I'm pretty sure anybody that would step up and be like, "Hey, I want to be poet laureate," would be given a fair shot. But um, when they asked me if I would be interested, I was like, "Hell yeah! Like that's really cool. What an accolade! Like who gets that accolade? Not many people get that accolade." So I was like, tell me more. What would be expected of me? And you essentially are just sort of like the beating heart of the creative writing community that you live in. And like, what did I do? Like some of the cool things I did, I I really wanted to make my 2-year term about making writing something big again in schools because when I was in school, I feel like it was kind of dying. Like we had some poetry contests, we had an oratorical contest where like you would get up and publicly speak. You would memorize this like half-hour long speech about a topic of your choice, and then you would have to present it in front of the whole student body. It was very nerve-wracking, but also really really cool.
Yeah.
And then there were lots of like little things, but I wanted to sort of like bring that back, and I wanted to get kids excited about it. So I did like school tours, where like I would go around and I would talk about my experience with publishing and self-publishing, and I picked very select pieces to share with the students about writing. I did not promote my books. I was like, they did actually give me a session after school hours where kids could voluntarily come, and like I did share a little more of my writing at that point because there were kids that were really like they were writers and they wanted to and they wanted to know more, and they had similar content, and they wanted me to read it and give them some feedback, which was really cool. So we did some workshopping at the high school level. I got to be a judge for lots of poetry slams in the area, as well as some theatrical competitions. So that was really neat. Like you're given this title and it's almost like a gift, and people just like put you up on this pedestal,
Yeah,
and you just get to do all of these really cool things. Like I'm not quite sure if like I made a huge difference as a poet laureate, but
I'm sure you do.
I really enjoyed it. Like and I think that's what really sort of scratched the itch for me getting back into teaching. It was like after I served my 2 years, actually during my term as poet laureate, that's when I applied for Teach for America, because I was like, you know what? Like I got to be in a classroom. Like going around and speaking to these kids, that's really what like awoke that drive in me again. So um and I'm not even gonna lie, it was probably that poet laureate piece that actually got me accepted into Teach for America, because when I did my interview, like that's all they wanted to talk about. Yeah, being poet laureate. And I was like, well, okay.
they're all
If you think
they're all as secretly ignorant as me, you know.
and the girl even said that. She said to me, she was like, I don't even know what a poet laureate is. She's like, but it sounds really important. And I was like, well, it's not. I'm not gonna downplay it. Like it's a cool title to have, but it's not like, it's not like I have diplomatic immunity, I promise.
Right.
I don't even get a 10% discount at the bookstore, it's just a title. But it was good stuff. I mean like, oh God, I've forgotten so much. I'm so glad you're asking these questions, because it's kind of like there are so many days where I think, man, I haven't done anything with my life. I'm like, I'm gonna be 32 and I haven't done anything with my life. And then you're asking me these questions, and I feel warm and fuzzy, like, okay, Bitsy, yeah, you're okay.
Yeah, absolutely you are. Boy, oh boy.
I mean, seriously, like I moved back into my parents' house after Teach for America, and I felt so hopeless. I'm like, I'm totally. It's just a transitional phase, and I know that. Like I chose to go back to school, but it's so easy to get down on yourself about that.
Yeah.
Just like, man, I'm in my 30s. I should be not living at my parents' house. I should be married with kids right now. Either that or like have published 20 books and, whatever.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's all
Comparison is the thief of joy.
indeed. Absolutely. And life is what happens when you're busy making those other plans, you know?
Exactly.
Um, sweet. So where were you teaching when you were involved in Teach for America? Was that one of the Carolinas? Is that in my head?
No, it's in your head, but it's right. I was teaching in Eastern North Carolina in a little town called Weldon, and it is the rockfish capital of the world.
Right on.
And it is right off of the Roanoke River, so that's why it's the rockfish capital of the world. It's a very small, very poor town. Like northeastern North Carolina is very, very poor until you get towards like the Outer Banks, and even right before the Outer Banks, it's very, very poor. It That teaching experience was probably the most transformational thing in my life, and it comes through. It literally bleeds into every single facet of my character and just pretty much everything that I do. And I think anybody that's had a really good experience with Teach for America, and I mean, when I say good, I don't mean easy, and I don't mean like all sunshine and rainbows. Like I
Not at
just mean
all.
really um, transformational. That's just the word for it. I think anybody would say that it just sort of changes you for life for the better. I think because it's really fun. I just did an interview with the local paper about this, and that's all she really wanted to talk about was teacher. She was so interested in my experience in America, and I love talking about it. But I also could spend this whole interview doing that, so you're gonna have to probably cut me off at some point. But the whole mission, the whole reason why they put you in these rural or not even rural, it's usually inner city or very rural. Is just you wouldn't believe it. It's very sad. Like when I walked into my classroom, like the ceiling was crumbling. I didn't have enough desks for the amount of kids that I was going to have. My desk was falling apart. Like the teachers were very much so expected to like provide the supplies for their students. So like the lady who worked at the dollar store and I became very close friends because I was just in there all the time, like buying things for my kids. And um, the administration, like their hands are tied because they don't get the funding from the state because we don't have, the test scores that we need to get the funding from the state. And we can't get the test scores because we don't have the means to give our kids the education that they're supposed to get. So it's just this very vicious cycle of just oppression and like race very much so has something to do with it. And I mean, like my school was 100% black. Like I was one of 3 white teachers. There were literally like it was 100% black, and my students. Oh God, I just can't say enough for my students. There was definitely a learning curve the first year.
What age group?
I taught I taught high school, so I was teaching. I taught 10th and 12th graders my first year,
Oh, wow.
and my second year I taught all 4 grade levels. I taught 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So I pretty much like I pretty much touched the brains of every kid that went through that school system those 2 years, which was pretty cool. But do you want to know anything specific? Because I mean, it's very it's very complex. That's definitely the one thing that I missed. And when I made the decision to leave, it was purely based on money and nothing else. And unfortunately, like it had to be because in North Carolina, There is a teachers union, but it's very, very expensive to be a member. So a lot of teachers are not represented by the union. So when you negotiate your contract, you're kind of at the mercy of the school district, and teachers already don't make that much money. It doesn't really matter what state you're in. Although I will say, I know Pennsylvania is one of the highest paying states for teachers, which is awesome. But in North Carolina, not so much. Like I'm pretty sure we did the math. The like a gas station manager would make more than what a teacher does. And when you're doing public service, like that's really hard to ignore. But of course, we're not in it for the big bucks. We're in it because we want to see kids grow and we want to, close that education gap. But I left because of the money, and my kids knew that. My kids didn't blame me for it. Um, I still keep in contact with so many of them, and it wasn't until just recently that I stopped doubting that I made any difference in their lives, because it's kind of like when you first step into that classroom, it's very intimidating.
Mhm.
Like,
Sure.
how am I these kids don't want to learn from me. And there were many days where like that was very apparent. Like they were just there because they had to be there. So you've got to find ways to make it interesting. But then you spend so many days just kind of really like disenchanted and disheartened. And then you see a Facebook post, and there's a kid that made dean's list their first year of college, and they're like, "Thank you, Miss Sanders." And it's just like, oh God, you
Yeah.
just you just want to drop to your knees and just bawl your eyes out, because you're just like, oh, I did. I touched one life. It was all worth it. It was all worth it. So that's the beauty, though. That's the absolute treasure of being an educator. It's just like, it's got to be, it honest to God has to be like um, your life's work, or else it's not going to mean anything.
Right.
And that's what I made it. That's what I made it those 2 years that I was down there. And I made the decision. I was like, you know what? I want to do this, but I want to do all the parts of it that I love. And I want to cut out all the parts of it that I don't love. And I was like, what is that? Oh, that's a school counselor. Like, that's what I want to be. And if I took so much away with me in those 2 years, but like my career choice was probably the biggest thing, because I just knew that grad school was in the cards for me. I just didn't know when it was going to be in the cards for me. So I'm lucky enough to be able to take this time to like make that happen for myself. But yeah, I don't know. If seriously, if there's anything specific you want to know, just ask me, because I'm an open book about that. Like it was there was a lot of bad experiences, but a lot of really good experiences. But I would say that all of them happened for a reason, and they all went into a greater meaning for sure. So
Well, that's incredible. I mean, I really appreciate your perspective. I think any way to learn about anything of any import has to come from one changing their own perspective. And one of the things I've very much admired my sister is an educator, and Lord knows I have plenty of friends that are teachers, and so I've always kind of admired certainly the mission of Teach for America, and it's amazing how much work has to go into just making that one imprint on someone. And it's especially through that program. I was just really interested to kind of hear your perspective on that, because it's not something that ever leaves you. There's no such thing in that field as a 9 to 5. Which I'm sure is a double-edged sword. But to your point, when you get it right, it's pretty great. So
it's
I appreciate that.
funny, because a lot of teachers, there are teachers that make it a 9 to 5, but you can tell that they're not the teachers that people remember. And I can tell you, like, my friends, my fellow core members in Teach for America that also taught in my school district, like, there were days I would be in that school at 6 a.m. and I wouldn't, like, there would be days that I didn't leave until 8. And like literally my principal was like, you need to leave. Like, we need to lock up the building. You need to get out of selfishly, I never wanted to take my work home. Like once I went home, that was my sanctuary.
Yeah.
That's how I took care of myself. That's how I like practiced my, self-care was I'm not doing any schoolwork at home. Like school is for schoolwork, So that was me being selfish. However, there were a lot of teachers that did that, but then just, didn't tie up the loose ends at the end of the day. But you could tell, like you could peg them. So I have the utmost respect for anybody who is in education. Um, it's not an easy job. It is not an easy job, and it is not for the faint-hearted. That is for sure. And it's largely thankless, which is really scary. And like going into this pandemic, with the school year coming up, going into this pandemic, I don't think it's anything we ever expected to have to deal with. And I'm really scared. I'm scared for people like my mom. My mom's a teacher. She's going back into the classroom. She's pretty immunocompromised, but she's still expected to go back into this classroom. And I won't even get on that soapbox. But it's just it's a scary thing, and I think people really sort of overlook that when they think of their children's teachers and teachers in general. Just they overlook that these are people too. Like they have families, and like they mean more than just a teacher to a lot of people in their lives. So it's definitely one of the most important, but I think one of the most taxing professions for sure.
Easily, especially nowadays. I mean, shoot, that's a soapbox I could join you on, but that's not for tonight.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, no, but certainly a lot of respect for it. Shoot, now I'm like fighting the urge to like talk about it.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't give in. Don't give in.
Yeah, no doubt.
Part 2. No.
Yeah, exactly. The anger episode. Yeah.
No, we'll keep it positive. I promise.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So I wanted to close this talk by talking about what I would consider your most recent project, but I'm sure it's not. I would love to hear more about the Found Love project. And before you jump into that, is there anything else you wanted to cover today that I maybe kind of skimmed over, or not, anything you want to talk about?
I mean, I kind of want to talk about this beard, Tom. This really nice beard. How do you maintain this facial hair?
It gets a little warm. No, it's been we've been working from home. Today is July 27th, I think, right? Something like that. And
Yeah.
And we've been working from home since like maybe March 19th or something like that. And I just kind of said to a buddy from work that I was going to grow my beard for the quarantine, and so I did that. And then I found out, which is for the best. I'll miss it, but it's for the best. One, it was coming in pretty evenly. Which was a nice treat, Not really used to that. It took 31 years, but we're there. But also found out that there's not going to be a Long Island Ducks baseball season.
Oh no.
So, yeah, but believe me, I'd rather come back with more normalcy in 2021, hopefully, than do a 2020 season where it's just like, okay, you're going to do your job, you can't high five the kid. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want to have to think about, for me, for a job, that's the ultimate stress relief. You know what I'm saying? It's the truest form of who I am when I get to do that with the fans and the kids and the family. It's great. And I don't want to. The idea of having to add anxiety to that's not something I want. So
that makes total sense.
I'm glad. But anyway, the Ducks would be the only reason to kind of, gosh darn, keep it clean. Well, it is clean, but like keep clean clean shaven, you know. And between that, I think I've done maybe 2 social things since March. So I mean, it just kind of had full chance to grow it out, and I'm just kind of seeing how it rolls, you know.
Well, it looks good. It looks real good.
Thank you
It's
very
just not everybody has that talent. Some people try and they just can't.
much.
So good for you. And honest to God, you cut out when you were talking about my latest project. I'm assuming it's Found Love. Is that what you want? Is that
Yes.
what you okay?
Yes, it is. All right.
All right. It's just like, oh my God, you froze. I have no idea what he wants me to talk about.
And of course, in the nightmare, like as soon as I come back, it's just like take it away. Yeah.
uh, yeah. So yeah, found love. Oh gosh. It's been awesome. And like I said, it's this thing that's totally replaced like all of my creative it's like sucked up all of my creative juices, right? But I absolutely am in love with it. And I'll tell you, it all started because I had a couple of friends who I met through my friend Kibwe, who he died in a a drowning accident in Costa Rica. He actually like moved to Costa Rica to learn how to teach. He learned how to he wanted to get certified to teach English as a foreign language. Um, so he moved to Costa Rica. He died in this freak drowning accident, like within the first week of being there taking his classes. And he meant so much to so many people. Like he was a super special person. Actually, you two would have gotten along famously. He's just one of those people that's on the level and just he connects with just any person he meets. Like he was just one of those people. Super special. Anyway, like when he passed away, that sort of pushed me to like get out of my comfort zone. Like it made me realize life is so short and we never know like what's going to happen to us. So we might as well just like have a damn good time while we're here, right? And I don't mean that like for me having a damn good time is like how can I create an impact? How can I make positive change? So I met 2 of his friends. Actually, I met them right before he left. I was lucky enough to meet them while he was alive. And they're my friends Veronica and Antonio, and they live out in Vegas. They have super cool jobs. They live these lives that I could not even imagine. Like he blows fire for Elaine, and she is like this. She's a masseuse, and she just like travels from place to place and like massages famous people. It's insane. Like I can't even imagine people have these jobs. But anyway, I digress. They do this really cool thing where they collect heart-shaped rocks from their travels. So like they've got them from every corner of the earth, and they all have these really cool stories behind them. And they were like, love is all around us. We just have to find it. And I was like, this is sweet. I want to do this. So I started collecting rocks, um, and like taking pictures of them, and like then I realized that I was finding hearts in like everything, like in little patches of moss and in like cracks in the floor and things like this, things that were just organically there. So I started taking these pictures and posting them on Facebook and I'm sorry, Instagram with the hashtag found love. And people were really liking them. They thought they were cool. And then people started taking pictures themselves and sending them to me and being like, Bitsy, look what I found. It made me think of you. And that's the coolest thing you can hear is that like, oh my gosh, heart-shaped things remind you of me. That's so sweet. It was so sweet. So I was like, you know what? This would be cool. Like this is clearly spreading joy. So I made years later, and I'm talking years later, it was probably like 4 years later, I decided, this should have its own separate thing. We should make a project out of this to see how far it can grow. And granted, I don't have like hordes of followers, but I have some diehards, right? That just find these really cool things and send me their pictures. And I mean, they're people from all over the place. And I've got a couple of army wives that are really, really into it. And of course, they're traveling all the time. So I'm getting pictures from like countries that I've incredibly never even really heard of. It's just, it's so neat. It's just really, really neat. So I started growing that on Instagram, and that's honestly like it doesn't even feel like a job. I don't really consider it a job. It's sort of like I'm not making money off of it or anything. It's just this project that I think has a lot of meaning, and people call me like, "Thank you so much." Like it just reminds me that there's there's love out there everywhere. You just have to find it. And I know it's just a heart, but a lot of people are like, it makes me think that somebody sent that to me or that I was meant to find that. And it's a spiritual thing for a lot of people, which I think is really neat. But it's really fun, and I tell people all the time, like I hand the stickers out all the time. I've got these found love stickers. I hand them out all the time, and I like leave them in books when I go into bookstores. I haven't been doing that lately because COVID, but I send them to people that want them, and it's it's just kind of this really cool thing, and I hope I mean I think it is going to stick around for a long time. But I recently found out that Drew Barrymore wrote a book. It's like a photo journal of, and she did the exact same thing. Like she found heart-shaped things. Yeah, Drew Barrymore. It blew my mind. We were in Lancaster the other day, and just happened to pick the book off the shelf because I was like, Drew Barrymore? What is this? I knew she wrote an autobiography, but what's this? And I was like, oh my God, I stole this idea from Drew Barrymore. So yeah, found found love. It was rooted in something really beautiful, and it's just growing into this thing that's more wonderful than I ever could have hoped for. So
Well, that's incredible. It's great for people to have things like that to kind of take with them, and it's amazing, especially during these times. There are a lot of people that kind of need that kind of presence in their day, even if it's just kind of a heart. And yeah, well, I mean, Lord knows I have a lot of love and respect for that. Tremendous stuff. Mitzi, I want to thank you so much for joining me here tonight. I had a blast. Um, to your point, I think you mentioned that a lot of what fueled you as kind of an educator, but I would think as a person too, because I kind of feel the same way. Is about kind of your ripple effect and the positivity and the changes that you can kind of have on people, be it profound or be it very subtle. I just want to let you know that you've certainly had that kind of impact on me. Time at your college with you was really great, and I'm really glad we've kind of kept in touch casually, and I hope we can continue to do that. And bottom line, just thank you so much. It means a lot for you to be here tonight, and certainly a lot of what I read when I see you on social media leaves me very much in awe of what you do. So thank you for that.
thank you so much. That's so sweet. I'm gonna come see you in a baseball game as soon as all of this is over. I swear. I really want to. I'm really excited to see that.
That would be cool. That would make my day. Sure. Sweet.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. That was so awesome. I really enjoyed it. I needed it. It was the perfect pick-me-up.
Yeah, right on. That's what it's all about. Friends, users of Corn listening, this has been Bitsy Sanders. This was the Corn Chronicles. The search continues. We had a blast here tonight. I hope you do too. Found Love Project. Maybe I'll write you all a letter, all three people that watch this. And I hope you all have a good night. Thank you, Bitsy. Bye-bye. All right.